Australia inspires a fresh take on life. That seize-the-day mindset reflects in all that Outback does, especially in the menu. Outback Steakhouse starts fresh every day to create the flavors that our mates crave. Enjoy mouth-watering steaks, grilled chicken, ribs, fresh seafood, and the world-famous bloomin' onion, all at affordable prices down under. Don't forget Outback's unique cocktails, wines, premium liquors and beer, domestic craft, import, and Aussie. Outback Steakhouse is relocated in Cary to 901 Walnut Street across from Cary High School. See you soon, mates.
You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.
You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
Most writers and radio show hosts know that to connect with your fans, you need to do more than just write books or record the latest podcasts. There are many different elements that go into forming an online platform, but there are also many hidden traps. To make matters worse, solid advice on how to survive the muddy waters is scarce. In the book Hidden Traps, I talk about some of the important issues of working with an online platform, highlighting traps that could put your physical or internet security at risk or be harmful to your reputation. Are your social media posts just links with a few disjointed words, making you look like someone who can't complete a sentence? Did your new website cost you more than you anticipated? Are you leaking your personal contact details across the web without even knowing it? Then you need Hidden Traps. Hidden Traps is now available in paperback and ebook from a variety of retailers, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Kobo. Visit blackwolfpublications.com for more details.
If you're 85 or younger, would you like peace of mind and comfort for your family? We're Final Expense Direct with an urgent message for you. The average funeral today costs over $8,000, but the most you'll get from government benefits is $255. How will your family pay the difference? We can help. Our senior plans start as low as just $1 a day and pay up to $30,000 for a funeral and other final expenses. Peace of mind is easy. There's no medical exam. You'll have lifetime coverage, and your plan can't be canceled as long as you pay your premiums. Call now for free information about our senior plans. Answer a few simple questions and receive approval right on the phone. Plus, call right now and we'll give you a discount prescription card for free. Call 800-553-8687. That's 800-553-8687. Again, 800-553-8687.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
Everyone loves liberty. Our rights come from God, not the government. So why are you letting other people tell you what's best for your health care? Exercise your freedom with Liberty Health Share. Liberty Health Share is a community of people who voluntarily share one another's medical costs. Liberty Health Share is founded on the idea that most people truly want to help one another. Healthcare sharing allows members to do just that as a true community that supports one another in times of need. Liberty believes people should make decisions for themselves and their families. Members are able to take back the freedom to make their own decisions about their health care. Freedom from guilt or doubt about how your money is used. You have the freedom to direct your health care, not to be dictated to by bureaucrats. Stop letting others tell you what to do and join a community of like-minded people. Exercise your freedom. Join Liberty Health Share and take back the control of your health care while helping those around you. Call Liberty at 855-58-LIBERTY. Again, that's 855-58-LIBERTY for more information, or you can check them out at libertyhealthshare.org. Again, that's libertyhealthshare.org.
Here's George Foreman with InventHelp.
Hi, I'm George Foreman. Do you have an idea for a new product or invention? People ask me all the time, George, how do I get my idea in front of companies? How do I get a patent? What do I do next? Do you have the same questions? I'll tell you like I'll tell them all. Call my friends at InventHelp.
Call InventHelp today for free information. InventHelp has been helping inventors for more than 30 years and has sales offices nationwide. InventHelp can submit your invention to companies who are interested in receiving new new ideas. If you have an idea and want to try to patent it and submit it to companies, you should call InventHelp today for free information.
Listen, I can't guarantee a company will be interested in your idea, but I believe every inventor deserves the opportunity to step into the ring and take their best shot. Put InventHelp in your corner.
Get your free inventor's information. Call 1-800-353-6490. That's 1-800-353-6490. Again, 1-800-353-6490.
At St. Jude, a family never sees a bill at all. It's like the world has been lifted off of your shoulders.
St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Finding cures. Saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
Sometimes riders feel lost, unsure why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing into full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, offering manuscript critiques and line edits through a mentoring editorial style. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services, visit blackwolfeditorial.com.
You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, Internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.
You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
My name is Jessie. I'm a United States Special Forces widow. This gives me a unique perspective on the world around us. If you're willing to listen, I'll tell you how I see it, and I won't pull any punches. This is my POV, which stands for Point of View.
All right, I'm joined today by a wonderful guest. Yes, I have a guest on Jessie's POV, and his name is Paul Shin. Paul, why don't you introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit about your background?
Hey, Jessie, thanks for having me on the show. I've been a journalist for over 20 years, and I recently wrote a book. It's a novel, actually, about North Korea called Half-Life, and I did a lot of research for it, so even though it's a novel, it's based solidly in a lot of real things that happened in the late 1990s through the early 2000s.
And I have found myself doing an incredible amount of research on North Korea of late.
Yeah, it's been in the news a lot, hasn't it?
I think every other day. In fact, I've actually given Kim Jong-un his own show nickname and sound effect.
Is that right? What's the nickname?
He is Quackers. I had to do something to lighten it up because I was constantly going back to him. And I'm sitting here going, okay, it's getting heavy. While I want to cover it, I don't want to sound down in the dumps.
Yeah, it's a very serious issue, isn't it?
Yes, it is. With the knowledge that North Korea actually has ICBM.
So I think the latest development was that they have tested some ICBMs that are able to reach as far as Hawaii or Alaska, possibly in the northern reaches of the West Coast and the mainland. So that is one of the sort of the triad that North Korea is working on right now. And ultimately they want three things. They want a ICBM that can reach mainland USA. They want a warhead, a miniaturized nuclear warhead that they can put on top of the ICBM. Or they want a warhead that they can put on a submarine-launched missile that they could station off the west coast of the U.S. So those are kind of the three main goals of the North Korean regime right now, and that's how they're trying to project the what little power that they have. So that's kind of the triad that they're working on, and it sounds like they've achieved at least a portion of it. And you had mentioned that the latest report from the Washington Post is that they have been able to miniaturize one of their nuclear warheads, possibly, according to the latest intelligence, to sit atop an ICBM, which would be a very significant step.
It is, because that's not easy research. That's not something where, okay, the thing's normally the size of a one-car garage. Well, just make everything a little bit smaller. There's actually more to it than that.
Right. It's a non-trivial problem, as they say, because not only do they have to miniaturize it, but they have to make it reliable enough so that it detonates at the correct time, because you don't want these warheads detonating at the time of launch, obviously. You want it to detonate at the appropriate altitude over land. The way that ICBMs work is that if they detonate at a certain altitude, so that is a really tricky math problem.
I'm sure it is an extremely tricky math problem. While I haven't discussed ICBM technology with anybody, it sounds like you have.
Right. In my former life, I was a physics major before I became a journalist. So I did a lot of science reporting at one time. These are really tricky problems that North Korea has been working on since after World War II. They imported a lot of nuclear technology from the former Soviet Union. They had developed a lot of rocket technology throughout the years, and they were quite advanced in rocket technology. So much so, in fact, that they were an exporter of short-range and medium-range rockets to various rogue states. But the thing that they were missing was the nuclear technology. So they have been known to collaborate with nuclear powers like Pakistan to try and refine their nuclear technology. So they were missing that component of their nuclear triad, so to speak.
Yes, in fact, Pakistan's where they originally, I believe, got their information. And then they'd also, when you mentioned rogue states, and I've got to say thank you, Israel, before I say this, North Korea had actually sold Syria a nuclear reactor about a decade ago. And thankfully, Israel bombed it off the face of the earth. Because, as I've learned, North Korea has proliferated every weapon system they have developed.
Right. Which is a real paradox to sort of put this into context. North Korea, as an economy, is a failing economy. It is barely able to feed its own people, but they have poured their resources and their technology into nuclear technology and rocket technology. Basically, because they are such an isolated country, they need some way to project their power geopolitically. And they have decided that the way to do this is to have nuclear weapons. That way they can exert sort of an outsized influence on their geopolitical neighbors, even though economically they are a failing state. So this is why they're concentrating so much of their effort into nuclear technology, especially ICBMs.
It's what amazes me about the whole thing is it's almost like the government doesn't care about the people, because they've had a drought. They're coming up on another drought and possibly another famine. And yet, instead of spending money to feed their own people, they're pouring all this money into the missiles and the nuclear technology, when you can buy a whole lot of rice for the cost of one missile.
Right. I think that's kind of the tragedy of North Korea as it stands today, is that the regime has decided that they're going to pour their resources into nuclear technology, rocket technology, as a way to kind of threaten their way out of the dead end that they're in, rather than investing the money in other economic avenues. They've decided that this is kind of the way that they're going to survive. So that is the tragedy. The people are not faring very well, obviously. In fact, that's one of the reasons that I based my novel in the late 1990s. There was this devastating famine, and still North Korea at the time was sort of obsessed with creating nuclear technology. So that's kind of why I based that novel during that time.
And I have read your novel, and I did find it absolutely fascinating, but I must say that I am just still sitting here going, oh my gosh, how can these countries' leaders let their people starve?
Yeah, I think it's hard for us to understand the thinking. I don't think we can get into the minds of the leaders of places like North Korea, thinking of it as a normal person would. These are leaders, especially in North Korea. It's this strange amalgam of a hereditary Stalinist state, so it's unique in that. The grandfather, Kim Jong-un. So Kim Jong-un's grandfather, Kim Il-sung, was the person who founded the North Korean state after World War II in 1945. And then he handed down power to his son, Kim Jong-il. And then Kim Jong-il handed down power to his son, Kim Jong-un, who is the current leader. But Kim Jong-un actually had a older half-brother, Kim Jong-nam. But I don't know if you recall, but there was a bizarre incident at the Kuala Lumpur airport last year.
And
where
Kim Jong-nam was assassinated with VX.
Yeah, it was a very bizarre incident. So the woman said she told authorities that she believed she was participating in some TV prank, if you recall.
Yes.
And she smeared some liquid over Kim Jong-nam's face, and it turned out to be VX nerve gas. And so the belief is that Kim Jong-un may have felt threatened by Kim Jong-nam, that maybe he would return someday and try to consolidate power around himself as the elder son of Kim Jong-il. So that is kind of the operating theory of why Kim Jong-un had Kim Jong-nam assassinated.
And yes, I also believe that was probably the root cause of that, because Kim Jong-nam may have felt he was just passed over by his father.
That's right. Although by all accounts, Kim Jong-nam seemed to be of a personality that he did not want power. But just being who he is made him an existential threat to Kim Jong-un. So this incident was one of those bizarre and yet wildly operatic incidents that go on in North Korea. Because Kim Jong-nam, by all accounts, didn't want the power, but it doesn't matter whether he wanted it or not. Kim Jong-un might have still felt threatened by his older half-brother.
So you said you can't get into the heads of these people by looking at it in a typical way. What type of a lens do you think we need to view it through? Because I'm sitting here just watching the goings-on, the outsider looking in, reading the news articles, and I've become quite the North Korean news junkie.
Yeah.
And it's like,
I think the lens through which you have to view news coming out of North Korea and the lens through which you have to evaluate the North Korean regime is that Kim Jong-un and those close to him will do anything in their power to maintain power. So it doesn't matter whether it makes sense to us as normal people. What they're doing is trying to hold on to power at all costs. And to them, a way to do that is to have nuclear weapons. And not only have nuclear weapons, but to be able to project that nuclear capacity to the U.S., which is their ultimate goal. Because when people have been saying on the news that this could be disastrous for South Korea, but in fact, South Korea is already under threat because North Korea does not need an ICBM to destroy South Korea with nuclear weapons. If they can miniaturize it, they could actually have nuclear-tipped artillery, and artillery is fully, Seoul, the capital of South Korea, is fully within the reach of artillery from North Korea. So they don't even need missiles, not even short-range missiles. They could hit Seoul with artillery.
I don't think that's something the average person understands, is the geographical distance of Seoul from the DMZ. It's not that far. Right. And yes, I have visited the DMZ and Seoul. it wasn't that far of a drive from Seoul to
That's
the
right.
DMZ.
It's not that far at all. So, yeah. So, in terms of the technology that North Korea would need to destroy Seoul, which basically the greater Seoul area contains 1/4 of the entire population of South Korea. So any kind of aggression, and they could sort of rain down both conventional and, even with conventional weapons, they could turn Seoul into a pile of rubble. So either way, any kind of actual military conflict would be disastrous on the peninsula.
Actually, I have an audio clip I'd like to play. It actually addresses that, and it was from Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dunford.
Mm-hmm. Many people, and this is an important point, many people have talked about military options as with words like unimaginable. And I would probably shift that slightly and say it would be horrific. And there would be a loss of life unlike any we have experienced in our lifetimes. And I mean, anyone who's been alive since World War II has never seen the loss of life that could occur if there's a conflict on the Korean Peninsula. But as I've told my counterparts, both friend and foe, it is not unimaginable to have military options to respond to North Korean nuclear capability. What's unimaginable to me is allowing a capability that will allow a nuclear weapon to land in Denver, Colorado. That's unimaginable to me.
So I thought how he took it from unimaginable to horrific. I actually think horrific defines it a bit better.
Yeah, I think the scale of destruction that we're talking about would be unprecedented in the history of humanity. It would the scale of destruction would be orders of magnitude larger than any kind of firebombing in Europe during World War II or anything like that. Even orders of magnitude larger than the atomic bombs on Hiroshima or Nagasaki. We're talking, tens, hundreds times more casualties.
Right, because you're talking a more dense population zone. You're talking better technology. Now, you obviously are of Korean descent, or were you born in Korea? I don't recall.
Yep, I was born in Korea, yep.
How does it make you feel when you know that your country has been living with this threat for years, and now people are going, well, maybe we're going to end up going to war there? I mean, that's got to be something that crosses your mind, because I'm sure you still have friends and family back in Korea.
Yeah, certainly. I think people can throw those words around, maybe we're going to war, but I don't think they quite grasp the magnitude of what we're speaking about. This is the kind of war and destruction that nobody could ever imagine. We're not just talking about, and even the loss of one single human life is a tragedy, but we're talking on the order of millions of people.
In the first hours.
If you can imagine that. Yeah, in the first tens of minutes, first half an hour, we're talking millions of people possibly killed.
Because
so
North Korea has artillery lined up just outside the DMZ, all aimed at Seoul. And we're not talking 5 or 10 artillery pieces. We're talking thousands of them. And they're dug in and entrenched and ready to fire.
Exactly.
Now,
I recall as a younger boy, we used to have civil defense exercises when I was a kid. Every month, on the 15th of the month, the sirens used to wail, and everybody would kind of get under the desk and simulate an air attack from North Korea. They have long since stopped doing that because stopping traffic in the middle of the day in downtown Seoul has long since become too unwieldy, right? It just is too cumbersome to conduct those kinds of exercises. And in some ways, those kinds of exercises are kind of pointless because the destruction would be so widespread that any kind of risk that you could mitigate by hiding under a desk is just so ridiculously minimal. in terms of how you could protect yourself. So it doesn't, in some ways, it doesn't even matter. But we can only hope that, I think our best hope is that the North Korean regime has some sense of reason to them, so that they would understand that if there was a conflict, some kind of military conflict, that their existence would also be wiped out. So hopefully, sort of in the old Cold War concept of mutually assured destruction, that they would understand that, and then that would stay their hand in terms of any kind of attack. I think that's kind of the only thing that we can really rely on.
I've got to say, I hope you're right. However, I also heard that North Korea loaded anti-ship missiles onto some of their ships that haven't had them in a couple of decades. Now, it's public news, public information, before anybody sends me hate mail because I'm revealing classified troop movements on the air. No, it's in the news. Get over it. There is a carrier battle group in the region. Do you think they're crazy enough to actually shoot at a U.S. military vessel?
I would hope not. That would be a red line. And once they cross that line, that kind of thing is very hard to take back. If that happened, then I think the only thing that we can hope for is that the response would be measured and proportional, as they say, so that they could, maybe there would be a proportional response, but it would stop at that. But the problem with that kind of thinking is that that kind of response can quickly escalate. So there's no real way to tell how far it can escalate. So once you cross that line, it becomes a really murky area.
I know, and I hope and pray that Kim Jong-un does stay his hand. But with this latest round of UN sanctions and the rhetoric and bluster, I mean, the latest round of sanctions. Now, I will say North Korea is practiced at evading sanctions. However, that it still has to hurt.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. But North Korea's thinking on this, from everything that, all the reporting coming out of North Korea, is that they feel that the way out of the sanction is to keep on bluffing and keep on saber-rattling to sort of bluff their way out of this. And, there have been several studies by think tanks saying that possibly the only way out of the situation is engagement, that you have to engage North Korea so that they feel that they have some engagement with the outside world, so that they feel that there is hope for them to develop economically. Rather than feeling hopeless and feeling cornered, I don't think that's a good place for the North Korean leadership to feel that they're in. When they feel hopeless and cornered, then they're going to do something rash.
Do you think that sanctions are the way to go?
I personally think, based on a number of papers and a number of experts that I've seen, that actually engagement is probably the way to go. Because it's kind of like, to make an analogy, it's kind of like having a really bad-natured bully in your neighborhood, right? And if you keep on pushing this bully into a corner, at some point the bully's going to snap. So in some ways, you kind of have to coax the bully out of their misbehavior with kindness. And one of the reasons that the West is reluctant to do this is because they feel that engaging with North Korea rewards bad behavior. And that is politically, it's very tricky to do that, because if the U.S., for instance, were to engage with North Korea economically, then everybody would say, why are you engaging with North Korea? They're behaving so badly. You're rewarding bad behavior. So politically, it's a very tricky game to play, but it is kind of the only hand that you do have to play to kind of coax them out of the bad behavior.
I find that very interesting, because I have another audio clip, and this was from Secretary of State Tillerson.
The diplomatic and other efforts of the past 20 years to bring North Korea to a point of denuclearization have failed. So we have 20 years of failed approach.
So Secretary of State Tillerson obviously recognizes whatever we've done over the past 20 years hasn't worked. And we've tried giving them things, we've tried not giving them things, we've tried talking, and flat out, the United States does not want North Korea to have a nuclear, the ability to launch a nuclear strike on the United States at will.
Right.
And I have to say, I
so
hope
if you
and
take
pray
that,
they never
if you
do.
take that argument to its logical conclusion, then that means if the U.S. does not, or the West in general does not engage with North Korea, then the only alternative is to isolate it, right? You isolate North Korea, you disengage, and then you impose sanctions to make life harder and harder on them. That doesn't mean North Korea is going to give up its nuclear ambitions. So they're going to develop nuclear weapons, they're going to develop ICBMs, and at some point they're going to develop the capability to deliver a nuclear weapon across the world through an ICBM. So that, of course, is not acceptable to the U.S. or the West. So if you take that argument to its logical conclusion, that means that the U.S. or the West, somebody, has to attack North Korea to take away that capability from North Korea. Now, the problem with that is North Korea has been very wily about how it's mobilizing or moving its nuclear capability around. So it's not stationed at any one particular location. It's mobile. It's on these mobile units. So to try and target those weapons is extremely difficult. So that means you have to launch a wide-scale attack on North Korea, and then you get into the same problem, right? You've kind of triggered this all-out war, which is disastrous. So that is kind of the logical conclusion of the approach of isolation and punishment. And that's why I think the way to go is try to engage, to try and coax them out of this kind of bad behavior.
Do you think a proportional response would be taking out their nuclear reactor, which is the source for their plutonium that they enrich to make the weapons?
Sure, you could do that, but again, that could trigger an all-out attack on South Korea. And from the public reporting that has been done on this, it appears that North Korea has enough fissile material to build tens of warheads. So that capability already exists. So even if you take out their nuclear reactors now, that doesn't mean that fissile material is suddenly going to disappear. They already have that, and it's stashed away somewhere. What are you going to do about that, right? That's kind of the next problem.
Exactly. I was looking at it going, they've already got this much highly enriched plutonium.
Yeah.
Because for those of the listeners who don't know how a nuclear reactor works, I actually did talk to an expert. You put in uranium and you get out plutonium. It's a little more complicated than that, but plutonium makes the bigger boom in the nuclear weapons once you enrich it and make it into fissile material. But that's the real quick
That's right.
thumbnail
One of
sketch.
The easy way to think about it is the two atomic bombs that were dropped on Japan at the end of World War II. There were both fissile bombs, meaning you rely on the division of these heavy atoms like plutonium and uranium to create the explosion. But one was a uranium bomb and one was a plutonium bomb. Fat Boy and Little Man. Those were the two different bombs. And one was plutonium and one was uranium.
And the one that produced the bigger yield per megaton was the plutonium one.
Yep, that's correct, yep. And uranium is a naturally occurring isotope, naturally occurring element, but the uranium that you need is the rarer uranium. So you have to refine it, highly refine it to get the isotope that you need to create a fissile bomb.
I actually think the intense sanctions right now, and I actually went back and listened to the whole hour's worth of commentary on the UN floor, and I'm frequently listening to these meetings. I don't always report on them, and I don't always pull audio clips, but I hate to say it, I think we're almost closing the barn door after the horses left.
You mean in terms of stopping them from trying to produce this technology to begin with?
Right, because we're imposing these really, really harsh sanctions. Well, it sends a message. A, are Russia, China, and Iran actually going to enforce these sanctions? Right. Because China certainly doesn't want the refugees that would pour over their borders.
Right.
Russia just recently set up a twice-a-week, I think, ferry between North Korea and themselves, and I'm willing to bet that there's more than just people and vacationers on that ferry.
Right.
So
yeah, North Korea is even for former allies like China and the Soviet Union and now Russia. Even for former allies, North Korea is kind of like he's kind of like the misbehaving nephew that basically goes off and does crazy things and then always comes back to them to bail them out of trouble. So they are no fans of North Korea, but as former allies with pretty deep historical ties, I think they try to do their best to manage North Korea, but it is increasingly difficult, and especially with somebody who is a leader that is younger, like Kim Jong-un, who doesn't have the kind of long historical ties with former communist bloc leaders. They used to have that connection of being all within the communist bloc, both China and the Soviet Union, now Russia. But Kim Jong-un is basically, he's a millennial, right? Kim Jong-un is a millennial. He's not of his father's generation. He doesn't have any living memory of that connection with China and the Soviet Union / Russia.
Right, which makes it, I'd say, much harder for him to understand the goings-on and the connections and why he may not want to upset every apple cart in town. Now, that being said, I'm going to ask you to hold your comments for just a moment while we take a brief commercial break.
You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, Internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.
You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
Most writers and radio show hosts know that to connect with your fans, you need to do more than just write books or record the latest podcasts. There are many different elements that go into forming an online platform, but there are also many hidden traps. To make matters worse, solid advice on how to survive the muddy waters is scarce. In the book Hidden Traps, I talk about some of the important issues of working with an online platform, highlighting traps that could put your physical or internet security at risk or be harmful to your reputation. Are your social media posts just links with a few disjointed words, making you look like someone who can't complete a sentence? Did your new website cost you more than you anticipated? Are you leaking your personal contact details across the web without even knowing it? Then you need Hidden Traps. Hidden Traps is now available in paperback and ebook from a variety of retailers, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Kobo. Visit blackwolfpublications.com for more details.
If you're 85 or younger, would you like peace of mind and comfort for your family? We're Final Expense Direct with an urgent message for you. The average funeral today costs over $8,000, but the most you'll get from government benefits is $255. How will your family pay the difference? We can help. Our senior plans start as low as just $1 a day and pay up to $30,000 for a funeral and other final expenses. Peace of mind is easy. There's no medical exam. You'll have lifetime coverage, and your plan can't be canceled as long as you pay your premiums. Call now for free information about our senior plans. Answer a few simple questions and receive approval right on the phone. Plus, call right now and we'll give you a discount prescription card for free. Call 800-553-8687. That's 800-553-8687. Again, 800-553-8687.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
Everyone loves liberty. Our rights come from God, not the government. So why are you letting other people tell you what's best for your health care? Exercise your freedom with Liberty Health Share. Liberty Health Share is a community of people who voluntarily share one another's medical costs. Liberty Health Share is founded on the idea that most people truly want to help one another. Healthcare sharing allows members to do just that as a true community that supports one another in times of need. Liberty believes people should make decisions for themselves and their families. Members are able to take back the freedom to make their own decisions about their health care. Freedom from guilt or doubt about how your money is used. You have the freedom to direct your health care, not to be dictated to by bureaucrats. Stop letting others tell you what to do and join a community of like-minded people. Exercise your freedom. Join Liberty Health Share and take back the control of your health care while helping those around you. Call Liberty at 855-58-LIBERTY. Again, that's 855-58-LIBERTY for more information, or you can check them out at libertyhealthshare.org. Again, that's libertyhealthshare.org.
Here's George Foreman with InventHelp.
Hi, I'm George Foreman. Do you have an idea for a new product or invention? People ask me all the time, George, how do I get my idea in front of companies? How do I get a patent? What do I do next? Do you have the same questions? I'll tell you like I'll tell them all. Call my friends at InventHelp.
Call InventHelp today for free information. InventHelp has been helping inventors for more than 30 years and has sales offices nationwide. InventHelp can submit your invention to companies who are interested in receiving new ideas. If you have an idea and want to try to patent it and submit it to companies, you should call InventHelp today for free information.
Listen, I can't guarantee a company will be interested in your idea, but I believe every inventor deserves the opportunity to step into the ring and take their best shot. Put InventHelp in your corner.
To get your free inventor's information, call 1-800-353-6490. That's 1-800-353-6490. Again, 1-800-353-6490.
At St. Jude, a family never sees a bill at all. It's like the world has been lifted off of your shoulders.
St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
Sometimes writers feel lost, unsure why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing into full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, offering manuscript critiques and line edits through a mentoring editorial style. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services, visit blackwolfeditorial.com.
All right, thank y'all for hanging in there with us while we paid those radio station bills. Now, thank you, Paul, for hanging in there with me over that commercial break. So is Kim Jong-un going to keep tipping over every apple cart he can find in the world and basically annoying everyone? Or do you think he's going to, at some point, someone's going to sit him down and make him come to his senses?
Well, this is a really interesting point because there is a theory that Kim Jong-un has a sort of rival faction within North Korea. People who were loyal to his grandfather and loyal to his father, but are not as loyal to him. And there is some indication that there are a group of high-ranking generals who are not too thrilled about having this young whippersnapper stirring up trouble like this. So if there is an end game in North Korea, one possible end game could be an internal coup d'etat where one faction of generals tries to take over power from Kim Jong-un, which is why you have seen such things, some really just horrendous things, such as Kim Jong-un executing one of his relatives, right? Do you remember this incident?
Yes, he executed his uncle, reportedly with an anti-aircraft gun. And then or there was another report that he fed him to wild dogs or...
Right. I don't think we can really know the manner of his death, but I think his death was confirmed. And what we're looking at in that instance is Kim Jong-un trying to consolidate power around him and trying to curtail any possibility of rival factions rising up against him, which is why he would go to the extreme of executing relatives who are generals. That uncle was a general, a high-ranking general in the regime. So there are periodic reports that there are opposition forces within North Korea, but because North Korea is such a centralized state, these opposition forces have an extremely hard time sort of consolidating power because everybody is encouraged to drop a dime on everybody else. So if anybody gets out of line or if anybody's indoctrination seems a little bit kind of strange, then they are encouraged to report them to the central authorities, which is why we have not seen any kind of coup d'etat happen in North Korea so far. But if there is an existential threat to North Korea, then one faction within North Korea might think, hey, we've got nothing to lose. Why don't we stage a coup d'etat against Kim Jong-un? And that could be a possibility. That could be one of the end games in North Korea of how the regime could come undone. It is a remote possibility, but it is a possibility.
So do you think North Korea is going to collapse economically anytime soon, especially with the latest round of sanctions? However, I will say they are one of the world's best currency counterfeiters.
Right. North Korea has created sort of the shadow economy where it manages to kind of hobble along, right? It sells missile technology to rogue states. It makes a lot of money that way. It is known for its hacking. It has allegedly has an elite group of hackers who operate not in North Korea, but in some data center based somewhere in China, where they are able to utilize servers that connect to the rest of the world. Because North Korea itself only has somewhere around 4 internet servers, apparently, as opposed to the thousands and thousands that we have in the U.S. And that's how they sort of keep control of the information going in and out of North Korea. Their computer technology is more like the intranet instead of the internet, because it's not really connected to the outside world in any significant way. So they've actually based their cyber hacking units in China, and those were the guys apparently who pulled off the hacking of the Sony movie theater emails. If you remember the incident with the Seth Rogen movie, the Seth Rogen James Franco movie, The Interview, where they hacked the Sony executives' emails and then embarrassed the hell out of all these executives. I don't know if you remember that incident from a couple of years ago.
Yes, I do. In fact, I actually bought tickets to see the interview, even though I knew my husband and I couldn't make it, just to prove a point.
Right. So it is thought that North Korean hackers were responsible for that particular incident. And the thinking is that they were operating actually within China and not in North Korea itself.
Now, I'm assuming that the Chinese government knows that it's basically hosting a group of North Korean hackers and doesn't care.
Well, that's not quite clear, actually. They could be sort of a rogue group that's moving around. It's not clear whether the Chinese government is sanctioning this behavior. It could be that they're just not able to stamp it out, right? Because a hacker can be quite mobile. So it isn't clear whether China is encouraging this, turning a blind eye to it, or they would like to stamp it out, but they're unable to. That's not quite clear.
Right. It's a little bit up in the air, and that's definitely one of the things that leaves diplomatic gray areas.
Right.
Now, one of the things when I visited South Korea, the Kaesong Industrial Complex was in operation, and it was a joint North South Korea venture. And that project actually gave me hope.
Yep.
And that project has since been shuttered.
Right. So that project, and also in the eastern part of the country, there is a very famous mountain range called Kumgangsan. Basically means Diamond Mountain, and it is renowned from sort of ancient Korean history to be a beautiful mountain range. So this kind of lives on in the collective consciousness of the Korean people, as say, for instance, the Rocky Mountains do to Americans. It is kind of this almost mythic place, right? It lives within the collective memory of the Koreans, even if they haven't been there, because it's talked about in literature dating back, hundreds of years. So what they did was North Korea opened that place up to tourism from South Korea, and it was actually quite successful. So there were these attempts at engagement, and that was also a way for North Korea to make money from the outside world. But for one reason or another, these projects don't seem to thrive. Maybe it's because of the regime change. So it is something, I think, worth pursuing to try and engage with the North. But at the same time, other security experts feel that these kinds of projects just provide capital to the North Korean regime to sustain itself, right? And some people feel that you kind of have to starve them out by not providing any kind of currency to the North Koreans. So, these are kind of the rival thinking camps on how to deal with North Korea.
And I will say, just out of amusement, I still have a couple of the North Korean products I purchased from Kaesong.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I picked up a bottle of North Korean plum wine that still remains unopened to this day.
That could be a collector's item at some point.
It's still in its original box and everything, so it's just sitting tucked away in a closet.
Right.
And it was just the novelty to me as a Westerner to buy something stamped made in North Korea. That's what caught my attention.
Yeah. I think that's a novelty for South Koreans as well. Yeah. It's very rare to have products made in North Korea even for South Koreans.
Well, I think it would also, if you look back in history, it would kind of be like the East-West German thing. If something was marked, had the East German mark on it.
Right.
It would definitely be a collector's item in this day and age. So do you think the North Korean regime is actually going to collapse either it's under its own weight or the sanctions or through a coup, or do you think it's going to end in disaster?
Well, I do not have a crystal ball, so I cannot tell you. I think we can speak in terms of likelihoods. And I don't think sanctions are going to make the North Korean regime collapse. I think, if anything, it'll just steel their resolve even further. They have enough ways of making money to kind of hobble along. So I don't think sanctions are going to bring North Korea to its knees. I personally think the greater likelihood is that some internal strife, because of all the conflict caused by the rivalry with the West and the conflict with the West, that external conflict may trigger an internal conflict among rivaling factions. I think, not having a crystal ball, I don't know, but I think that is one of the greater probabilities when it comes to the end game in North Korea.
I actually hope, I hope that I'm wrong, that there is no conflict on the Korean Peninsula. Yeah. But I will say, with all the propaganda North Korea is putting out and all the things they're taking, and remember, I have friends in the military community across the spectrum, I'm hearing a lot of, for lack of a term, itchy trigger fingers.
Yeah. And the problem with, even with internal conflict that makes the regime collapse is that when you have a regime collapsing, sort of imploding internally, that creates a lot of instability. So during that time, who's in charge, right? You have to ask that question. Who's in charge? Who has the codes to the devices, any kind of nuclear devices that they have? So that is a huge uncertainty, which kind of leads me back to my original point, is any kind of conflict where you have some kind of catastrophic collapse of the North Korean regime rather than an orderly collapse or an orderly disassembling of the North Korean regime, any kind of catastrophic collapse can be potentially disastrous. So going back to my first point, this is another reason why, in some ways, it might be better to engage with North Korea, to try and promote sort of an orderly transition rather than having the thing. Because even if Kim Jong-un were thrown out of power with a coup d'etat, there's no guarantee that whoever's in charge afterward would necessarily be sympathetic to the West. We don't really know that. And during that chaos, what's going to happen to all the nuclear weapons, right? And God forbid, one rogue general decides to take matters into his own hands. That's the kind of uncertainty that is extremely troubling on the peninsula.
I can see where that's a huge problem, and I think the last thing China wants is either a sympathetic to the West, North Korea on their border, or an uncontrolled chaos collapse, because then they'll be flooded with refugees.
Right. I think from China's standpoint, chaos is more frightening than a regime that is more sympathetic to the West. In some ways, so all China wants is for their neighbor to be predictable and in some ways stable, whether that regime is friendly to the West or friendly to them, because the worst thing from China's standpoint, I think, is to have a neighbor that is chaotic and unpredictable.
So do you think there would ever be reunification of the Korean Peninsula?
I think from an emotional standpoint, every Korean would like the peninsula to be reunited. But I think as time goes by, it's been, over 50 years, 60 years since the Korean War now. And sociologists have said that once a people are divided for more than half a century, that they, in essence, start to become two different countries. So I think a lot of South Koreans are feeling that at some point, maybe the two countries have begun diverging too far for them to smoothly reunite. And if you recall, when the Berlin Wall fell and East and West Germany reunited, it was an immense financial burden on West Germany. It almost bankrupted the country. The reunification of North and South Korea would be orders of magnitude harder than that, because the disparity in the economies between North and South Korea is so much larger than East and West Germany. It could cause financial ruin in a way that we haven't seen. So I think South Koreans, as much as they would like North and South Korea to be reunited, the practical aspects of reunification are becoming harder and harder because of the differences both in the economy and in the regime.
And I see all of those points. Now, I do wish, and this is an emotional standpoint, that the families, that there are still some Korean War survivors of the families that have been divided because of the war. And I do wish that North and South Korea would allow those families to meet.
Yeah, I think there are currently some overtures to have kind of a final round of family reunifications of people. These are basically people who are children at the time of the Korean War now. We're talking about people who were toddlers and maybe children. Maybe some have some living memory of their siblings when they were kids. And they've had a number of these reunifications over the years, and they're always really kind of emotional events. You see these siblings reuniting, And they look kind of similar, but then you see that the North Korean siblings are very gaunt and not very well off. So it kind of highlights the economic differences between the two countries at the same time, as it's sort of tugging at your heartstrings, seeing these siblings reuniting for the first time in 50 years, 40 years, 50 years. These events go back a number of decades, but it's heartbreaking, right? Seeing these siblings who see each other for a few hours and then they have to go back home and kind of relive this memory of meeting their siblings for a couple of hours.
I wouldn't even want to have to be the psychologist to straighten out that disaster. Right.
It is extremely heart-rending when you see these reunifications. And the reality is we have reached a point in time where those siblings are basically now in their 70s, 80s. We're running out of time. This is kind of the last chance to have those family reunifications. So there are overtures going on right now, especially with the new South Korean president who was recently elected. He has been more of a proponent of engagement with North Korea. There are certainly some overtures going on right now.
Well, I thank you for the very insightful discussion on North Korea. I found it fascinating. And as I do with all my guests at the end of an interview, I do give them a chance to pass out any social media information they'd like. And please do mention your book by name and where we can find it.
Sure thing. I appreciate you having me on the show, Jessie. The best way to reach me is through my website is www.paulhbshin.com. That's paulhbshin, all one word, .com. And you will find links to my book there, Half-Life. And that is probably the best way to reach me.
Well, I don't normally give book reviews on either of my shows, but I will say I'm an avid thriller reader, and I did read Half-Life, and it was amazing. And being a news junkie, I was like, I remember that. I remember this. And you did your research, and you got your facts right, as best as I can tell anyway.
Thanks, Jessie. Yep, I did my best to try and weave in some real-world events.
And for anyone who wants to contact me, you can find me on Twitter at Jessie's POV, or you can email me at the station, jessiespov@klrnradio.com. And if you'd like more information about my other show, Jessie's Coffee Shop, you can also hit me up at the station at jessie@klrnradio.com. And you regulars know what's coming. You new listeners, hang on for the ride. On that note, folks, I'm out of here!
You can lay down if you wanna. You can run away if you wanna. You can pretend that this is totally okay if you wanna. You can play dead if you wanna. Forget what they said if you wanna. Turn your back on the country needing you right now, but I don't wanna.
Australia inspires a fresh take on life. That seize the day mindset reflects in all that Outback does, especially in the menu. Outback Steakhouse starts fresh every day to create the flavors that our mates crave. Enjoy mouth-watering steaks, grilled chicken, ribs, fresh seafood, and the world-famous bloomin' onion, all at affordable prices down under. Don't forget Outback's unique cocktails, wines, premium liquors and beer, domestic craft, import, and Aussie. Outback Steakhouse is relocated in Cary to 901 Walnut Street across from Cary High School. See you soon, mates.